It is said that reporters write the first version of history. It's a version that aspires to be objective and devoid of personal emotion or interpretation. Anyone who reads news accounts of war, disasters, or other events that lead to human suffering has to wonder what effect it had on the reporter on the scene. Well, UT San Diego military affairs reporter Gretel Kovac recently wrote a series of essays on her experience as a war reporter. She joins me now. What made you decide to write this first-person account?
Well, to be honest, I was very reluctant to do so. This was actually the idea of our editor-in-chief, who was thinking, you know, we've run all these eyewitness accounts in recent months as ISIS, the Islamic State, has been advancing across Iraq. We've shared accounts by Iraqi immigrants, by Marine combat veterans, politicians who were involved. Why not share the story of one of our war reporters? And his perspective was, not only were you an eyewitness, but you're trained in writing, and so you can perhaps convey in words what some people may not quite be able to communicate.
War is horrific. What consequences of war did you see up close?
Well, going into a war, you expect to see atrocities, death, destruction, but it's one thing to think about these things in abstract before you go there, and another to see, a human being who's been burned horribly, or, buildings destroyed, whole towns leveled. It has an Armageddon type feel to it that can be difficult to process.
Why did you want to be a war reporter?
I wanted to cover the biggest story in the world that was unfolding in my backyard when I was living in Cairo, Egypt at the time. But also I think there was a certain amount of comfort that I had in terms of with the idea of going to a conflict zone because of the military experience of several members of my family.
And what was their military experience?
My grandfather was, both of my grandfathers actually served in World War II, but one of my grandfathers was at Pearl Harbor when it was bombed, and then he went on to become an Army officer, did 2 tours in Vietnam and 1 in Korea. My father was an Army soldier, selected for West Point, went there for a few years, but then became disillusioned with the war. But in my family, I think we've always had a respect for military power as a way of protecting our American way of life. That, because I have combat veterans in my family, they don't see it through rose-colored glasses by any means, but they consider, armed intervention a necessary evil at times.
So the U.S. went to war in Iraq because the Bush administration said that there were weapons of mass destruction there. Those weapons were never found. Did that at all disillusion you about wanting to continue to cover events there?
I don't think it disillusioned me, but it certainly caused me to reevaluate my thoughts about the war, when it became clear there were no WMD to be found. And also, more importantly, from my perspective, because I had been in New York City for the 9/11 terrorist attacks and reported from Ground Zero as a Newsweek intern, the alleged ties between Saddam Hussein's regime and Osama bin Laden or Al-Qaeda, those never materialized, it turned out not to be true. And so at a certain point, I just found myself asking, why are we here in Iraq? Why are we not focused 100% on Afghanistan?
We've done countless segments and stories about returning soldiers from Iraq and Afghanistan, coming back and dealing with PTSD. How did you cope? How have you coped with what you saw as a reporter in those regions?
I feel that everyone has a cup of grief, if you will, that they can, it gets filled up and it drains down at times, and, you go through certain life events. Some people are more resilient than others, but after 8, combat reporting trips, I just got to the point where I couldn't reset back to normal when I got home as easily as I could before, and I realized that, I was probably at the end of my career as a war reporter. So I did get some treatment for combat stress and PTSD issues and work through it a lot. I think some of those things that will always stick with you, those memories, you just can't unsee things that you've seen.
Gretel Kovac, thanks so much for coming on the program and sharing your story with us.
Thank you.